Today's guest is Damian Hall. Damian is an ultra runner, a writer, a climate activist, and he's one of those guys who didn't quite follow the typical young prodigy route into elite running. Since he found running in his 30s, he's gone on to do some wildly impressive things. Winner of the Spine race in 2023, 5th at UTMB in 2018. He has multiple FKTs under his belt, including the Pennine Way, the Cape Wrath Trail, and the Southwest Coastal Path. And he's been to Barkley, and he's got to the 5th loop before multiple times, which is rare. That piece is probably worth pausing on. Many people don't make it that far at the Barkley Marathons. And he's recently written his 3rd running book, Running Forever, which focuses on longevity and staying in the sport for as long as you can. Today we spoke about all things running, about the Barkley Marathons, and about what it takes to focus on longevity, to look after yourself long into your life as a runner. Thank you, Damian, for coming on. I hope you, the listener, enjoy my conversation. Without further ado, I bring you Damian Hall. Today, what did you have on the cards?
Oh, just, I was meant to do 10 miles easy with 4 times 30-second hill strides. The truth of it is I left a little bit too late and I did 8 miles with my strides. So, yes, but that's okay. I think a younger me would have been super frustrated and or maybe dashed out later and got 2 more miles in. But nowadays, I think a more mature me isn't too stressed over a mile here or there. But actually, it's a glorious day here in Wiltshire in the UK, and it feels like we had a long winter of rain and greyness, and we've just had a couple of days of absolutely glorious sunshine. So it's it's nice to be out.
Nice. I've heard it's been awful.
Yeah. I mean, I'm lucky. I dashed away to America for a race in the middle of it, but it just that greyness and the rain just seemed to linger this year. Weeks and months of it. So it really feels like spring is here now. You know, flowers are out and things. It's really nice. When are we talking?
Sure.
It's middle of March. Yeah, March the 19th. It's spring is here. Spring is here.
Days are getting longer. Weather's getting better. Moods are improving.
Yes,
it's all looking up.
Yeah, it's great. It's lovely.
Were you at Barkley?
Yes, I was at the Barkley Marathons this year. Yes.
Yeah.
For
How'd
a
it
third
go?
time. About the same as normal. Yeah, there have been no finishes there for 2 years. And the main reason is the course. I believe the course is kind of currently impossible or too hard for me. I was there in 2024 when there were five finishes, the most ever, and I was on that 5th loop, but I did not finish. And they, Carl and Laz do change the course. Well, most years they change the course in some way, but if there are finishes, they normally add something to the course or make it more difficult in some way.
I feel like Laz is his ego's been hit that year, and so he's now like, I refuse to make this easy enough for 5 finishes.
Well, this is kind of what happened in, I think, was it 2017 perhaps, when there were 3 finishes and then there weren't finishes for 3 or 4 years after that. So they sometimes, what I would call maybe like overcorrect the course, and it doesn't hurt the reputation of the race, does it? Like, it's 39 editions and 20 finishes. And for 2 years now, no one's even gotten to a 4th loop. And they've added, I think, an amount to the course that makes it impossible for me, anyway. I mean, maybe there's a level of athlete. Well, there is a level of athlete above me, but someone like Matthew Blanchard, who was there, but whether he could finish it, I don't know. But but I still feel very lucky because only 40 people get to start it each year, and a lot of people would love to do it or at least try it, and you feel very lucky to have a go. And I basically I got onto the 3rd loop. I was the last person out there, but I did come in from that loop. I didn't have all my pages. I had sort of 3 of us were on that final loop. One of us, 53-year-old Sebastian Raychamp, he got all the pages. The other 2 of us actually, independently of each other, came back sort of without the pages because we'd Matthew said he was terrified. I wouldn't go that far, but like, the weather was pretty bad, and we both got wet and cold, and I guess didn't feel safe ultimately. Like, I was getting too cold, and sort of gave up looking for the book. / thought, actually, I'm not safe. I'm going to come back in. So it's there's almost no safety net there. You're not tracked. You got no phone. You're not allowed any electrical items other than a head torch. So in some ways it makes you safer. In some ways it makes you go, well, if I fall here, no one's going to find me for maybe 12 hours or something, or so it does, in a way, makes you safer. But still a great adventure, and I'm still here.
Just a quick little interruption. I just want to talk about Innovate, the sponsor of this episode. Innovate have been sponsoring the podcast for a while now. If you've been listening, you'll know how much of a fan I am of Innovate. Innovate were born in the Lake District. That's a hilly region, mountainous region here in the UK, and it gets quite a lot of rain. Pretty infamous for the amount of rain it gets, actually. And so as a shoe designer, a shoemaker, they're testing their shoes on muddy terrain. And for a lot of you right now, it'll be winter. There'll be a frustrating amount of mud, and you'll be running through all sorts. The dedicated amongst you will be getting out there and doing it no matter what, and you want decent shoes on your feet. Look no further than Innovate if you want some proper lugs, trail shoes that are actually built for all the terrain. Go to innovate.com, inov8.com. Use the link in the show notes to get the 15% discount. There has been a little bit of a problem with the Runnable discount, I should tell you that. Basically, it was listed on a bunch of like coupon websites, and so fraudulent activity has been taking place. So we're trying to protect it from just being overused, but we want you guys, the listeners of this podcast, to benefit from the discount. So go to the link in the show notes to find the discount code, and go to innovate.com. inov8.com. Buy yourself some proper trail shoes with proper lugs for proper grip in muddy, playful terrain. We want to encourage you to get out there, be playful, get muddy, and enjoy the trails. Okay, back to the show. How do you actually get in? Because I know that it's a bit of a weird kind of. Don't you have to sort of present? So am I outdated in thinking you have to like bring a number plate from your local state or something like that? That's how it used to be.
Kind of. So I'm not meant to share, certainly publicly or even privately with most people, how to get in as such. And there's no website for the race, but there's plenty of things online that might help people. So the idea, I suppose, is if someone's really, really determined, they will find out how to get in. When you turn up, if you get a place, you get an email back from your essay application, if you're lucky, saying condolences, and it's kind of like bad news. It's like, get your life in order. This is your last chance to pull out. You probably should pull out, but if you're really stupid enough to not pull out, here, you're accepted. Here you go. And if you're so when you get to Frozen Head State Park, you're either a virgin or a veteran. And if you're a virgin, it's the only place in the world where it's just totally normal to turn to the person next to you and say, "Are you a virgin?" And no one laughs or thinks it's weird. If it's your first year, you bring a number plate. Yeah. If it's not if you're a virgin, you bring a number plate, and he collects the number plates and hangs them all up on display. And then if you're a returning runner, so a veteran, each year it's something different. So one year it was socks, a very specific type of socks. Everyone brought the socks for Laz. Another year, what was it? I'm missing. I've only been 3 times. So this year I'm pausing because it's not always Lazarus Lake now. So Lazarus Lake is in his mid-late 70s, and he's kind of passing the race over to someone called Carl Laniak, who's been there a long time as well, and but much younger. And Carl actually does a lot of the sort of the footwork now. So Carl requested a holiday ornament. Now I actually tiny bit misunderstood this. So of course in America, happy holidays, they kind of mean Christmas, holiday, Christmas. But I thought of it as Well, they say vacation, don't they? I thought of it as a holiday, and actually, you'll like this as a former Wiltshire man yourself. I took him a mini Stonehenge.
Brilliant.
I thought, what's Wiltshire famous for? We've got Stonehenge. So I looked on the, I think, English Heritage website or the Stonehenge website, bought a little tin of a little Stonehenge, and but I also thought, well, Spinal Tap, isn't it? I hope you've seen Spinal Tap. There's a scene with where some American rock band sort of mocks the idea that Stonehenge is actually absolutely tiny. They're talking all about this amazing Stonehenge monument, and it's tiny. So I bought a little Stonehenge in a tin, sat there with Carl and said, "You've seen Spinal Tap, right?" And he was like, "No, I haven't." So I'd failed in two ways. Like, I'd brought a funny thing that didn't mean much to him, and it wasn't a holiday ornament really, but I was still allowed to run. So and someone in the queue gave me a bit of string so that in theory he could attach that Stonehenge to his Christmas tree if he so wished. But yes, it's so there are lots and lots of quirks to the race.
Yeah, it's so funny, isn't it? Does Carl light a ciggy at the start?
No, so Laz is still there and he still does that.
He still does that. At least that's his role. Okay.
Yeah, so I think Carl does a lot of the admin, but the hard graft. But Laz is definitely still there. He was all around there. He's still making the final decisions on things. He still starts the race off. I don't know who blew the conch, for example. I think Carl did, but I was asleep and it was 5 o'clock. But yes, it's something of a handover. I imagine Laz will be involved for as long as he's alive, but just doing less of the physical work, I think.
When you're all like in camp and you're sort of mapping things out, because you hear about certain things last minute, right? So you're all figuring out like last minute plans and stuff, and then you get to bed. What is it like when you hear that conch horn go off? What is it like? Talk us about the emotions that go through your head.
I mean, it is a real mix. It's, there is part of you going, at last, because you've been, what's the word for it? It's been on your mind like constantly for several months.
It's like a relief.
You've been dreading, and you're not dreading it, but it's a pressure. Pressure gets released. Like it's like, right, finally. But there's also, especially if you've been there before, there's also like, oh God, here we go. And it is a bit like, say, I've done the winter spine race. I've completed that 4 times. It is a sort of similar, but not exactly the same feeling of phew, here we go, but also So it's a wonder. It's an absolute privilege to have that feeling, right? Like, especially at the Barclay where so few could do it. You're privileged to get that moment. I think above all, I'm excited and looking forward to it. I think that's the overpowering feeling, but obviously some apprehension and a little bit of ouch, this is going to hurt.
A lot of people ask me if I would ever do the Barclay marathons, and it's a resounding no. I have no interest. Like at this point, maybe as I become more and more experienced, I get more and more crazy. But right now, it's like unappealing. And the same for the winter spine. Just super unappealing, man. Like, what is it about these races that is appealing to you?
I think fundamentally it's an adventure.
Yeah.
The winter spine really appealed from the off. Again, they're like massively intimidated by the idea, but really compelled towards it. And I can still remember seeing it advertised in a magazine, in a trail running magazine, before it had existed, and just thinking, wow, that isn't even possible, kind of thing. I was quite new to the sport, and there weren't that many races like that, but I didn't really realise. Well, I didn't think it was possible, if I'm honest. But I was really compelled towards the idea of and there's almost a sense of wonder of like, what does it feel like?
Yeah.
Is it possible for me? And then with the Barclay, there's an extra element of puzzle, I think, because there's so much mystery around it. There's so much research you need to do and homework, and the difficulty with navigation. There's an extra puzzle element. So, and I suppose you do. When I first heard of it, I did kind of think, that's bonkers and beyond my capabilities. But then I suppose over the years you build up and you do longer challenges. I guess I did several winter spines. I've done the Tour de Gionne 3 times, which is a 200 miler in the Italian Alps. Races like that, and you're sort of, I guess you're growing in experience, you're growing in confidence, and you're looking for not necessarily harder things, but different adventures, I suppose, looking to be challenged in new ways. So after a while, there isn't. I don't think in the running world there is. I think it is the toughest event. I mean, there's something like the self-transcendence 3,000 100-mile race in New York, but it just goes around the same block. I can't face doing that. But some people might think as more appealing or more doable than the Barkley. But yeah, I think it's looking for adventure, looking for challenges. Yeah.
As a character, would you say you're someone who likes problems to solve?
Ooh, good question. I mean, in sort of 100-mile and 200-mile races, I feel like problem solving becomes a skill and almost something desirable. The people who can, whether it's kit or it's often nutrition or people who can fix, work out what the thing is and fix it, probably do better. However, there's an element of the Barkley, nearly, as far as I can see, every finisher, there've been 20 finishers, has been a scientist or an engineer.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I'm not. That isn't my thing. I studied. Well, I've got 2 degrees in sociology, which is a debate whether that's a science or not. But I'm not, and I was a journalist and I've written books. And all right, my main income now is I'm coaching people, but I don't have a science background, or I don't think like an engineer, and that is sort of what's holding me back. In that you need to be precise with your calculations. You need to be clear, you need to make them well in the first place and then follow them. And I'm much more of a sort of daydreamer. Hey, let's run up this bit and see what it's like. Hey, is it down here? Let's find out. And you can't do that at the Barkley. You've got to be sure that it's down there or up there, and you've got to remember that it was that tree and that boulder and that bit of river, that where the river turns, that's where you head off. You've got to remember a lot, and you've got to be precise. Make calculations and be precise. And it's really, really hard when you're really, really tired, but it's the second night without sleep, and you've been going for 55 hours, and you're just wrecked. It's really hard to do that. And that's the bit that I struggle with, the mental, solving the puzzle mentally is the bit that I'm struggling with. Yeah.
Something really interesting about this dichotomy of running being an art versus a science, right? Because, I've always found that marathon running, for example, is really clinical, and especially when you are competing at a certain level, or you're trying to really sort of get those faster times. The training becomes really clinical, and I always find that when I speak to really elite runners, their training seems to be more and more clinical. And for me personally, as the artsy creative type, who's certainly not an engineer, not a scientist, I sort of get put off by that. I quite like training by feel, or at least tuning. I talk a lot about tuning in with your body and listening to your body and all that sort of stuff. What do you think about when you're coaching people and when you're applying it to your own training, this kind of balance of we have to do the right thing, we have to kind of be clinical with our training and get the right paces and efforts in there, but we also need to kind of tune in with that, with how we feel on any given day, and we might be feeling tired and understanding why that might be, but it's not all a science, right? And there is still heart to it. How do we keep hold of that but keep performing well?
Yeah, no, I love that, and I love the idea it's both a science and an art, and there must be a bit of crossover in the middle where it works. I think the key for me is to have a good idea of some universal principles of good training theory, but then within that, so just for example, one of the most universal kind of rules not everyone follows this, but the idea that you sort of build up gradually over 3 weeks, and then a 4th week is often a sort of deload or adaptation week, because if you just keep going up and up and up, or the same, the chance of injury or burnout, most people would agree is increased, is to an unsustainable level. And then even within a week, I think most coaches would agree it's probably sensible to, try and have a few days in between a strong, a workout running with intensity and a long run, for example. You might, ideally, most weeks anyway, you'd put a gap, you'd put a good gap to allow recovery. But then within those principles, I think I've got to be careful what I say in case some of my athletes are listening, but within those principles, there might be days where the plan says, I suppose, I'll give the opposite example. I don't want to encourage athletes if the plan says 6 miles to go and do 20, but I would say, but the opposite. I mean, the opposite might be true. I would, no, I think there is room for that. I definitely like the idea of, I really encourage my athletes to think, say it says a workout in the plan and they go out and they just don't feel it. They just, something's off. They didn't sleep well, work stress, the weather's terrible, but why not push it, see how you feel tomorrow. Why not push it back to tomorrow? Like, I definitely encourage that. I don't know with most, the tricky one would be with it says 5 or 6 miles easy, or it says don't run, and actually I feel amazing, I'm going to go and do 20 miles. I think some stuff like that, you might get away with it once or twice, but like if I'm coaching someone and they're doing that every week, there probably needs to be a conversation, or at least I need to help them understand what's sensible. So yeah, there's a fascinating area in between, but I do quite like that. I've certainly, even when I have a coach myself, and I have had days where, sometimes it has said 6, and I've gone, actually, it's glorious weather. Actually, if I'm totally honest, this week I've done a tiny bit less today, but on one of the other days I did do a bit more. It was just great. I felt great. Weather was lovely, and not dramatically, but I did a bit more. I think you could play around if you get the overall picture, I think is the key thing. That's where I would.
For sure. Yeah, I think it's really difficult as well, because like I work with some people who are really keen to like push really hard all the time. Like that's just how they're wired, right? And if you were to give them a program, they are gonna do it. No matter how they feel, they're gonna do it. And I wouldn't even say that that's necessarily advised, because it might be that you program something in and it actually hits them in a certain way, or they didn't get a good enough sleep, or they haven't eaten properly, or whatever happens. We need to adapt the training, right? But they're not adapting it. They're like rigid, robotic, and that's amazing. But it's also difficult because you need to pull them back sometimes. Whereas there are other people, myself included sometimes, that need to be pushed and need to be told, no, you don't feel like it, but actually you're just kind of listening too much to those thoughts, and you do need to just go out there and do the thing, because a lot of this is about discipline and doing it regardless of how you feel sometimes. So how do you strike that balance?
Well, that reminds me of, I've had 5 coaches. That makes it sound like I fall out with people a lot, but that really isn't true. But a lot of them were quite short term agreements. Sure. But I've had my current coach, 5 years, David Roach. But before that, I had 2 years self-coached, and my first year like that actually was possibly on paper like my best ever year. And I did kind of more volume than I had before, and I went along. I joined a running club and did group club workouts, with other runners on a track for the first time. Those 2 factors were, probably significant in me having a good year. Difficult to be sure. But then the next year, I started to plateau in my race results anyway. It wasn't a disaster. I didn't get injured, but I could see now I was plateauing and just running around tired probably. And I was carrying on doing fairly big volume because I could, not necessarily because it was the best thing. So I thought, well, I'll get a bit of coach's input. And also, so I was carrying on with fairly big volume, but I was also, I was less and less doing the quality work, the workouts, because I think I was going to the club less, or maybe I'd stopped going. It is a few years ago now. But when I took on a coach, David Roach was like, let's try doing a little bit less volume, but I want, quality, usually only 1 workout a week, and some strides elsewhere. But, and it's, you never really know. I mean, whether it's difficult to judge, especially in ultras, whether that's improved or not. But I definitely had 2, 3, 4, arguably 5, good years. And I think, without a coach, I would be doing more volume, less quality, and I'd be running around tired quite a lot, thinking that was good training. Obviously, we get tired sometimes, but being tired all week probably isn't a good sign. So, I'm probably a bit like you in that I wouldn't. I'd enjoy the big days out and not want to run fast sometimes, because it's a bit horrible, isn't it? Sometimes.
You just, sometimes as well. I'll do my quality days on a strength day, and so I'm like, So I'm like going out doing some threshold or doing some like intervals or something, and then I've got like strength in the evening, and it just feels in the morning like, oh, I know I've got a big day today and I have to be like really on it. And before, you know, if I was just sort of coaching myself or like not really taking my training very seriously, I'd just be like, oh, do you know what? I'll just go out easy. It's fine. And I think it's really easy to do that, to just sort of fall back on it. And I guess it all comes down to like, how important is this to you? Like, how important is performance to you? And what does this all really mean? And like understanding what the reasons you're doing this for are. I guess like when I'm speaking to you as someone who is, you know, just written a book on longevity in the sport, a lot of people talk about like, you know, if you're always running fast, that's when you're going to get injured, you know, and a lot of people sort of chase performance all the time, and performance is one of these things that can ultimately lead to injuries and maybe like a shorter lived career in the sport. How do you balance performing well but also maintaining a long-term relationship with the sport, like actually lasting forever? Like I think about this a lot because I love running. I want to be running until I'm like 70, right? If I can, I want to be doing this stuff forever. It's brought so much to my life. Like, it's far more important that I am running than I am performing. But I want to perform. It matters to me that I become a better ultra runner. But I want to like balance the two. Like, how do you get that balance right?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's and something I guess I'm thinking about all the time for myself and my athletes. I think there's a few things. I mean, one is I like that idea of firstly thinking about your life holistically, as in not just seeing your running in a sort of what do I say, like in a silo, like in a separate compartment, like how you slept, what you're eating, work stress, life stress. That is all impacting your running, and your running can impact the other stuff as well. So thinking about everything in your lifestyle. I mean, one of the classic ones is, I guess, almost like, how much are we sitting, and have we got good posture when we do run? You know, and most physios will say, most runners have weak glutes, and usually that could well be from the amount of sitting we do, or the lack of sort of strength exercises to offset that. So the first thing might be trying to think of your overall lifestyle. How can we measure some of that? I do encourage people. HRV isn't, it's not perfect, or resting heart rate in old money isn't perfect, but it's another gauge that we could have. So I tell my athletes kind of like, you've got your subjective, how do you feel that morning, but then the objective as well on the watch. And technology is not perfect, but it's another little gauge, isn't it? And then I think it's trying to see recovery as part of the training. So this overlaps with the holistic idea, but it is like, are you eating enough? Are you eating, ideally getting protein in fairly soon after, long runs, workouts, strength workouts, eating enough, sleeping enough. When I researched this book, I think the thing I could improve on most probably is the sleeping element, because it's so easy to undercut the sleep. But as we get into later years, sleep becomes more and more precious, and we're getting less. For example, we're getting less testosterone, human growth hormone, and a lot of that is coming through when we're sleeping. And then if we're undercutting our sleep, we're getting the hormones sort of. We're not getting the good hormones, and cortisol might be higher, which is sort of the bad hormones. Although we need some cortisol, but So holistically thinking about recovery. So some recovery things I do, for example. For nearly 10 years now, I've gone to a physio preemptively. So I go there roughly once a month.
Nice.
He just, a quick check over, maybe a couple of single leg exercises to see if there are any imbalances. Usually, hopefully nothing significant. And then just a leg massage. But nearly always there's some tightness in a foot or a calf that I hadn't realised. Yeah. So who knows how many injuries. And I have, touch wood, I've been uninjured in training anyway. I did get injured in one race. Uninjured in training for kind of 7 years really, or at least I've occasionally taken like 3 days off, like had the courage to, and that might be the next step actually. But preemptive things like physio, sleep, food, doing the strength work. I don't 100% do the strength work, but I probably do at least 80% of the strength work set me. Eating well, I've given up. I mean, it's only more recent, but I haven't drunk alcohol for 18 months. But yeah, I mean, I was uninjured when I was drinking occasional alcohol, so you can't say that's... Well, it's difficult to know. When you're doing 4 or 5 things and you're staying uninjured, you don't always know which of them.
It's not necessarily scientific.
But you always got to keep doing all of them in case it's all of them. It's probably not one, it's probably a combination. But that's the other thing. I think having the courage to go, actually, my foot feels a bit off, or I'm exhausted today. I can't pinpoint why, but actually I'm just going to run easy, or I'm going to run less, or I'm even going to take a preemptive rest day. And I try and tell my athletes, because some of them will hate having their running taken away. They might see it like that. Whereas I see it like you're just bringing a rest day forward, right? Sure. You're not necessarily losing miles overall, because even if this, and also you might be bringing a recovery week forward. Like, and next week, if all's well, we can go sort of medium or big again. So that might be the next element, is having the courage to be flexible, I suppose, in with training. So I think those 3 things, and I guess it might be, it might be being strategic with racing, as in, I suppose I usually have like roughly 3 3A races a year.
Sure.
And not maybe some B races around them, but not crazy amounts. But somewhere in amongst those things is what seems to work for me anyway.
Isn't it interesting how the basics stand so true forever? Sleep, moving well, what you're doing outside of your running, prioritize recovery, how are you eating,
Well, I often get athletes asking for things, asking about, ice submersion. Sure. And what are those legs, compression legs, and massage guns. And I'm not saying all of that stuff is nonsense, because there probably is some elements in some of those things, but they're probably not as important as how much sleep are you getting, are you eating enough calories, are you being flexible, sensible with your training when I don't know, life stress is high. Those things aren't necessarily, I'm not going to sort of just say they're nonsense, but they're not as significant probably for most people as sleeping and eating and being sensible with training.
I would say, like, the priorities, quite often priorities are flipped, and people think that they need to do ice baths and sauna, and they need to get these compression leg, I don't want those big leg things,
But I think they're called compression legs. I've never tried them.
Things like that, or like crazy different, or balms, or like all these different remedies, and they think that's going to optimize their performance, but they're not getting the basics right. And the basics should come first. By all means, get a muscle gun, or get whatever, balms really work well for you. But first, get the basics right, because you can get so far. You can get so far by just like I don't know, for a lot of people listening, many of them will be pretty health conscious, but many of them will also be drinking and will be disrupting sleep and will not be prioritizing the right things. There are so many easy wins that can just be sleep, or, a mobility practice every morning for 10 minutes or whatever it is.
Yeah, another one in there is often the supplements. And I'm always getting asked about supplements. In fact, I've had a message this morning from a stranger sort of saying, what supplements do I take, should I take? And firstly, actually, I'm not qualified in nutrition, so I'm very, very reluctant to, give out any advice there. But that's the classic thing. I remember having an athlete who kept asking me about supplements, and but actually he was only running about, kind of 25, 30 miles a week. And it was like, well, actually, running more will get you, it's the thing that will get you fitter.
Yeah, right.
The basics, doing the basics well, rather than the tiny, the tiny, do you need a bit more vitamin B? That said, sometimes people do find they have a deficiency, and the classic one for a lot of runners would be iron, but people need to do that properly, because if you have too much iron, I think it has almost the same downside, there's not enough iron, which is, a sense of fatigue and things, which is difficult to detect in runners who are training well. But we can have deficiencies, but people can get too obsessed with the marginal gains, I suppose, or the tiny bits.
I talk a lot on this podcast about the industry and the pressures of the industry. On Instagram, a lot of people see people doing amazing feats of endurance, or doing crazy mileage and not getting injured, and quite often People sort of forget to focus on their own journey, I guess. I do wonder, like, you started running quite late, didn't you? Or at least compared to many. Some people start in their teens and early 20s. When did you actually start running? This episode is sponsored by Innovate. I am such a massive fan of Innovate. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while now, you'll know how proud I am that this podcast is sponsored by such an amazing brand. They make such amazing products. They're based here in the UK. And if you're looking for trail shoes, I'm always ranting on about how good the trail shoes are. If you're looking for shoes that are actually going to deal with proper trails, not just like dusty trails, but actual muddy trails. Like if you're out there right now in the winter, you'll be dealing with some serious terrain. So you need some shoes that can actually deal with some serious terrain. None of these like pathetic trail shoes out there. Innovate have proper trail shoes with solid uppers, with massive lugs, the whole range. But also, they've got a massive selection of gym kit and hiking gear and everything else that you need for the outdoors. So go to innovate.com, INOV8.com. Go to the link in the show notes and you'll have a code there that will be generated for you, and that will give you 15% off. That's innovate.com, INOV8.com, and sort yourself out.
Yeah, well, I mean, I love those stories where people have, jumped off the couch and transformed their life, starting with a couch to 5K. I do love those stories, and but I'm not quite one of them in that I always played a lot of football and I love trekking actually and a bit of mountaineering. So I was reasonably fit, but I was actually feeling a little bit unfit compared to normal, and I had just moved to Bath in the UK where they have a big a really popular half marathon in March. And I signed up for the 2011, and I'm pretty sure I would have been 36. And I just loved it. And I did it the next year, and I did my first marathon the next year, dressed as a toilet. And then a magazine sent me to, I was a journalist, and a magazine sent me to do my first ultra marathon that year. They kind of called my bluff. I just wanted to write about the marathon I'd run, but they were like, no, we'll send you on this. And so I'm probably 37 then. And I just loved it. And I didn't really know how to train. I was undertrained for it and so on, but I just loved the experience and just thought, I want more of this. And I guess I trained more and more. And the next year I was doing my first 100K, 100-miler. And the next year I was doing my first spine race. So I really got carried away. But I think some of it was that midlife. I used to joke it's a midlife crisis, but some of it was kind of like, I've only just discovered this, but I'm physically, I felt fine in my 30s, late 30s, but like physically I've only got a few years to sort of get to my peak. So there was some impatience. But at the same time, I did get a coach quite early as well, which I think was pretty helpful because, till then I didn't know how to train, and I probably would have injured myself with the sort of enthusiasm of it, but I had a coach. And I just loved it. And but I was those early races weren't particularly competitive, but I was quite competitive. Like I was doing okay in those races, even though they weren't that competitive. And that also gave me a sort of, oh wow, something about this suits me. And just got carried away. And it would tie in with the journalism I was doing at the time, where I could pitch to a magazine and say, hey, I want to go and do this race. It looks amazing, really tough. Do you want a story? And usually they'd be like, okay. And then I could get a free place, firstly, because some of these races are quite expensive. But then also it gave me quite a healthy pressure, actually, because I knew this one magazine wouldn't take a story. They didn't want the story if I didn't finish the race. So that would be a kind of a wasted...
Right.
And I was a new father at the time as well, and running really fitted into my sort of new lifestyle much more than sort of playing football. Because you can, get up early, get your run in, and you haven't disrupted the family weekend. Whereas football, you'd be away for 3 or 4 hours. And so it all sort of, I can see now it all fitted together quite nicely. And 4 years after my first ultra marathon, I got, you can just about see it behind me. Yeah, got a GB vest for the trail running team. So I really got carried away at the age of 40. So I'd really got, fundamentally, I just loved it, and I was really passionate about it. I was really curious about it. I was really curious about bigger distances, but then also this sense of almost making up for lost time. Like, I'm 40 now. If I'd discovered this earlier, I might have been even better, I suppose. yeah, but also I don't look back too much on that and with real regrets. Like I've had an absolute blast. And then I turned 50 a few months ago, so I've had a whole decade, and I won my 2 races. All right, they weren't UTMB, but like I won the 2 races I was in last year. So I'm just so grateful that I've discovered this sport, and then it seems to really suit me. But it does suit a slightly more mature athlete, actually. Like the top end speed.
Yeah.
Isn't crucial like it is in obviously in 5Ks and so on. However, yeah, the higher your top end speed, the higher your easy pace might be. But at the moment, that's not, in future years and decades that I will see a decline there. But at the moment, I'm just about hanging in there. So, super grateful and lucky.
Yeah, I guess where I was going with my line of questioning was sort of like, I wonder, I speak to a lot of young athletes, like people in their 20s, and they're so caught up in like comparison with others. And I guess like once you get to a certain age, like most people, once they mature to a certain age, have kids and kind of more important things happen in their life, they maybe have a more grounded approach to all this stuff. And I do wonder whether starting later, in some ways, you're quite athletic, you hadn't necessarily found this sport yet, but you were clearly very fit and very capable. And then you found this sport. Do you think in some ways you sort of skipped that whole process of dealing with the youthful comparison with others and the struggle of pressure and stuff that I come across so often?
Yeah, it's a good question. I can't promise to be like totally immune, from comparison. Yeah. I do like, I'm on Instagram and I do enjoy it. I love seeing pictures of runners in mountains, really, and I do enjoy that. But certainly when I started, I wasn't on Instagram or Strava, and they weren't such big things. And so the first few years, there was very little comparison. There wasn't. In fact, the sport was sort of quite underdeveloped then, and there weren't really many places. I remember one Facebook group called Ultra Running Community, I think it was, and there were less than 3,000 people there. Now, last time I looked, there were like 60,000 or 100,000. I never go in there anymore. But that was almost the only place, and there was like one podcast for ultra running. So it was a lot smaller world, and there was hard. And I didn't know that many ultra runners either. So and I wasn't on Instagram. So I guess I'm quite lucky in that I did a few years before it became more of a social media thing. But it is definitely a sport that lends itself to social media well, because it's doesn't suit, say, television so well or radio. Look, ask your parents. In terms of comparison, I do believe in that idea. Comparison is the thief of joy, and I have done that thing that people have done of, you've gone out for a long run, you've had a great day out, you've just thought I loved that, it was a great day out, and you put it on Strava. You have a quick look and you go, oh, someone else did a mile longer than me, or someone else was a bit faster than me, and you start to get disappointed in your own run. But it just doesn't make sense. But I guess this happened to me again last year. I've had some moments where, so this is a good example actually, because this shows that I'm not immune from it totally. But so I was building up for the Lakeland 100, one of our sort of premier 100 milers in the UK. I've never done it before. I guess I was hoping to win it, but fundamentally I try and tell myself I'm just here to give the best performance I can, to do it at the best time that I can do it, because I can't control any other runners. And I was trying not to look at the start list to not know who else would be there, but someone else told me, oh, that runner and that runner are going to be there, they'll give you a good race. And I was like, oh, I sort of wish I didn't know that. And I really tried not to, but I did look at one of them on Strava, and he was out wrecking the course when I was wrecking the course, and his runs were significantly quicker than mine, his training runs. That said, of course, as coaches, there's the caveat of actually my runs they're meant to be, I think one was meant to be easy, moderate, but one was meant to be easy. But I remember feeling quite tired on one of those runs and not feeling my age. And I did look at his afterwards, and they were quicker. And I remember thinking, and he's 10 years younger, right? And I remember thinking, and I felt quite, a bit deflated. And I thought, but I had a word with myself, and you can only do the best that you can do, right? So you can't do any better than that. But in training, his running looked better. He's younger, he's looked faster. He looks physically stronger than me. When it came to the race, I won. And I don't really know why. I did run with him for a little bit, and shout out to Rye Webb, great guy. He's a coach as well, such a strong runner. He'd have to tell you I think he caught up to me at one point, and then he seemed to kind of bonk. So whether it was a nutrition thing, I'm not sure, but that what looked on social media like, I suppose, superior performance didn't necessarily translate on race day. And I'm not digging Rye out at all. He's sensational. He's had GB vests. He's a great guy. But I think that hopefully that's an example of when you sort of get in the comparison trap and start putting yourself down almost and thinking I'm not. Well, hopefully that's enough of an example. I got a brilliant one actually. A brilliant one. So my book that's coming out 9th of April, if you'll excuse the clunky plug, it's called Run Forever, and it is about running into sort of your master's era, and how can you run as strongly as possible as you age. There's an interview in there with Debbie Martin-Consani, who's a brilliant Scottish ultra runner in her early 50s, and she talks about which race was it? Basically, a man came up to her in a race and said, I've been following you on Strava. Your runs are quite slow. And she beat him by 5 hours. So I just, social media, I suppose social media isn't real life. It isn't real life. No, it is a tough one. And I definitely have athletes who battle with that. And I'm not totally immune, but the amount of times comparison on social media hasn't turned out to be the reality.
Sure.
There's a couple of good examples.
I think I told you before we jumped on that I care so much about longevity in the sport for my own reasons. I think a big part of that for me is making sure we have a good approach to it all, that we stay grounded and we stay aligned with what the real reasons why we're doing this are. Not everyone's competing. Actually, the vast majority of people who are running ultras are not competing. They're just doing it for their own reasons. And so we get caught up in all of these kind of different comparisons, whether it's on social media or not. It's in real life, we hear about certain times people get, and we sort of compare each other or whatever, which is a strange thing because most of the time people are really doing this stuff simply because they love it, right? And they're doing it because they want to prove something to themselves, or they want to prove that they're capable, or they might be doing it to raise money for charity, whatever other deep, meaningful reasons. And so there's more important reasons to be doing this stuff than performance. But I am curious, why did you write this book? What was it that made you go, do you know what, I'm going to really research this idea of running forever and being a strong athlete long into the later years?
Well, primarily it was just almost a selfish sort of where I was as an athlete, being sort of 48, 49, being grateful that I could still compete in these races, but also thinking, well, this is change, physically. I guess the first two physical changes I noticed were, my top end speed in K workouts and even in short races just isn't there anymore. So my VO2 max has dropped a little bit, and then also just feeling a bit more tired. Recovery from a workout. The first thing I noticed actually was the day after a workout. And by workout, I mean, a run intervals or tempo, a run with intensity. The day after, I'm nearly always tired now. Whereas in my early 40s and even mid 40s, the next day I'd still be fine and just run a perfectly comfortable, easy run the next day. But I was feeling tired the day after. And for a while it was puzzling me, am I overtrained? Am I underfueled? Have I got a virus? Have I got a deficiency? And then it just occurred to me maybe it's my age. But that's it. It's a tough moment, It's a tough moment because till then I'd never felt any age-related thing other than the receding hairline. You can just about see, or say just about see, and anyone can clearly see. So it's a tough moment. It probably took me a year or two to really accept, actually, because till then I kind of felt, I wouldn't say invincible, but you're running 100 milers in the mountains, you're running 200 milers, you're running the spine race, anything seems possible. My body seemed to hold up to most of it. So it's a hard moment. And then, and I've got other friends, obviously a lot of your friends end up being similar ages. So I got other friends going, similar ages, and they were interested. And actually my commissioning editor at Vertebrate, who commissioned my previous two running books, she's a similar age and she's a great ultra runner, and she was like, well, let's look into this, So there was already a book for triathletes. There was one for cyclists. There's one talking a bit about obstacle racing, for example, for sort of middle-aged athletes. And I thought, well, there isn't a guide for runners. So what I wanted to look in for it personally, selfishly for myself first, like what is going to happen to me? What can I offset, I suppose? What can I slow, pause, or even reverse for my athletic aging? And so, Kirsty Reed at Vertebrate Publishing said, go away, research it. Let's do a book on this. And I suppose it's split into 3 sections. The first one is, the bad news, the good news, and then the ugly, which is basically the sort of training advice. You can't escape aging ultimately, but there are some myths around it. And there's a lot. And there was a lot of good news, actually, that we are a sort of pioneering generation. The generation before us weren't living, the sporting life that a lot of us are living now. And a lot of the science is based on sedentary people. And also a lot of a study on Swedish twins actually suggested that the biological element of aging might only be 10 to 30%, as in the genetic aging that you've inherited from your parents. Up to 70% could be lifestyle. So that gives us a huge sort of scope to not fight back against it, but mitigate it and control our aging to an extent. So there were, and then you look around and you see lots of really inspiring athletes, especially when it comes to endurance. I mean, sports based more on power and speed. You're gonna feel that age decline sooner. But in endurance, like I said, Sebastian Raychon earlier. So the Winter Spine Race this year, the women's winner was 55, the men's winner was 53. Now that's not a standard running race, but that's proper running endurance, and the 50-year-olds are winning. So that's some good news in itself.
Yeah, I guess what I'm most curious about is, like, did you find anything that was like super surprising? Because I know we spoke earlier about the basics, like you often asked. For all the tips and tricks, and you're like, actually, it's not that interesting. You just need to focus on the basics. But was there anything in there that was like super surprising, whether it's on diet or exercise or anything from your research?
The bit that surprised me most, well, I'll come to that in a second, but just some of the training sort of guidance is probably what most people would guess. In that, firstly, don't stop. You're kind of swimming upstream, and if you don't get your arms in for a couple of times, you might not get back to where you were. VO2 max goes first, so keep doing VO2 max intervals. Your lactate threshold will start to go, so keep doing them as well. Strength training is just becomes absolutely critical as we get into sort of 40s and beyond, especially for female athletes. We all experience muscle wastage, and then bone health, and especially again with female athletes around menopause. And there is a whole chapter on menopause, but I haven't mansplained it. A woman has written that section, Renee McGregor, the sports dietitian. So I think a lot of people, and ultimately we probably might have to do a bit less volume, think more about recovery, maybe spread our training out a bit more, maybe a sort of 9-day week, so that we're sort of make bigger gaps between sort of running hard, running long. Make sure there's probably 2 days between anything truly testing. Maybe an extra day off. Maybe a bit more cross training. Depending on your history, depending on your age. And I'm doing less run volume, bringing a little bit of cross training now. Not huge changes, but little ones. Might have to be a bit flexible. And then sleep and diet are huge. But the thing that surprised me from the research was the mental side, actually. So there was this amazing study. It was a Harvard study. It was a couple of decades ago now, but apparently it's been replicated. And basically they took a load of people who I think were in their 70s, and they made them live for several days as if they were a decade younger. So they redecorated a place. They put the news on from that. Put the news on. They made them watch films, the music. They made them discuss the news events from then. So they made them live for a few days as if they were a decade younger, and their physical markers improved. Their eyesight improved, their hearing improved, their dexterity improved. And isn't that mind-blowing? Pun not intended. So, we can't go, I'm 60, but I'm going to think myself 20. it's obviously not quite like that. But if we think I'm old and slow and I'm going to get injured and I'm going to, like, it's kind of become self-perpetuating.
Yeah.
Whereas we probably do have to be a bit more sensible, a bit more, tweak our training a bit and be a bit smarter and a bit more flexible. But I honestly would say to most people my age and older, like, keep dreaming big, keep doing big things. Don't think, oh, I can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And how you think about yourself. And there was a study the opposite way as well of negative views on aging, and ultimately the people who had negative views did die earlier. I think that was only a sort of survey study, not as in depth. But the way you think about yourself and your age is will affect your body and your aging. So I thought that was probably the biggest takeaway from the book. And
that's fascinating. I mean, even on a small scale, like, I always argue with my girlfriend because I sort of joke sometimes if I'm getting a little bit ill, I'll be like, I'm not getting ill, because I believe if I believe I won't get ill, then I'm not gonna. And it is a bit of a joke, but I have heard of certain case studies where, you know, people have been told they've done this sort of controlled scenario where they've chosen people to tell them increasingly that they're looking rough, and then, like, you know, each day someone else will tell them that they're looking more and more rough, and then they do actually end up getting ill because they're convinced basically by others that they look bad, so they start feeling bad. And I think I can imagine that's the same. Like, if you suddenly start feeling an ache and then you're, I'm getting old, and you're constantly kind of moving around and thinking, I can't do that, I'm too old for that, then it's just going to deteriorate you, right?
Yeah, and that becomes, there's almost a doom spiral, right? Because you might go, I'm not going to run today, I don't feel,
Sure.
Although, sometimes that might be sensible, I should caveat that. But if you're constantly doing that and I don't know, you're not as sensible with, say, alcohol or your diet, and then you don't go to bed, like, you start, and then when you do run, you don't feel as good because you've lost a little bit of fitness. Maybe you sign up for park run, you're way off your PB, so you don't train again. Like, you can totally see how it would sort of spiral. And back to those studies, actually, I can't remember it in depth, but there was definitely a study on injury recovery, actually, from, I think it was even fractures, but people were told amounts of time for the recovery, and people who were told, you're going to be all right in 6 weeks, often recovered sooner than the people who were told you're going to be right in 10 weeks.
Interesting.
I'd have to try and dig that out somewhere, but and obviously you can't tell someone you're gonna, you've broken your arm, you're gonna be okay in a week. Like, there is an element of realism to it, but people who believed they would be recovered sooner.
We're not talking about, like, manifesting things into existence. We're not talking. This isn't like we're just talking about there is real power in the mind, and I think quite often about this because I was once told, I didn't realize this until a few years ago. I had, it was many years ago now, but I had a bit of an injury, and my physio told me, if it's a 3 out of 10 pain, don't worry, you can run on it. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize that. Like for many years before, I would have a pain, and I was like, avoiding running on it, and I was scared, and I didn't know. But as soon as she told me that, as soon as she told me, don't worry, if there's a bit of pain, it's still strong enough and it will start, will adapt, I felt like it was way better than I would have done if I was, like, worried about it, right? And I feel like I healed quicker because I was like, it's actually not a big issue, it's just a bit of pain, and it's in the recovery phase. I'm gonna train it, and I'm going to be, working on it. It will adapt. It's not broken. I think there's so much power in the mind in that sense.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I have to ask you, Damian, just entertain me. I eat a plant-based diet myself, and I don't know, are you a vegan?
Yeah.
Did you do a fair amount of research on diet, and what were your kind of findings in the research in terms of? How in depth did it go? I'm not sort of trying to be. We've had a few vegans on. I try not to go too much in depth because people get triggered. But I am interested to know, as a vegan author who's writing about longevity, how much of the book went into diet, and what were your findings generally? And I know it will have been unbiased.
There's a whole chapter on diet, and I'm very lucky. I work with my friend, sports dietitian, world-renowned sports dietitian Renee McGregor. So I'm very lucky. Any doubts, I check with her, and she's she's an author herself. Brilliant couple of books I should mention. Fuel for Thought and More Fuel You. Probably that second one's even more useful to people if people haven't seen her stuff already. And she's worth a follow on Instagram, where she's really active and informative. She'll only give evidence. She'll only give suggestions based on science, and she's really good at explaining it in a sort of accessible way as well. So most of that chapter is based on her, her what she's written and said, and she gave it a look over as well. And I would say there's probably nothing radical or surprising in there. A lot of it's common sense. And the first thing she is constantly saying is, eat enough calories first of all, because runners are at different stages of wanting to be competitive. But if you really want to be competitive, sometimes there is a temptation to sort of be as light and thin as you can, and that often isn't. It's quite easy to tip over into an unhealthy place. So first of all, make sure you're getting the calories in to support your training. And the big one for mature athletes probably is that it is protein. So we're experiencing some muscle wastage, so we need to work on that. We need to fight back against it. But if you don't put protein in at the right times as well, you may not get. In fact, you'll get less benefit. And so the key thing that has always really helped to me is apparently, we can't digest more than about 30 grams of protein an hour. So if you sort of don't have any protein, I'm still rubbish at getting protein in at breakfast, but if you don't have protein through the day and then go, I'll eat a massive bowl of lentils or a whole chicken at dinner, that's okay, but a lot of that will be wasted. You haven't actually put in 200 grams of protein. You've put in probably 30 grams still. So you've got to try and spread the protein through the day. And she does recommend that kind of 30-minute window after, say, a strength workout or a run workout of getting some protein in.
Is that right? Because I've heard differently. I've heard that it doesn't matter all that much the window after your running.
Yeah, there was a study a couple of years ago that suggested it wasn't so important, but her advice is still, it's better to, because the temptation might be to not think about it for 3-4 hours and then kind of forget, perhaps.
That's how what I've always thought. It's like a 90 minute rule has always encouraged me to do it, like as a rule, like eat the food.
I think ultimately it's probably not critical that those 30 minutes, but I think it's more that you might get in the routine of going, I've done a workout, some protein, let's start the bit of protein. Because I know I'm a bit like that. It's a bit like, if I don't do it then, it might be 4 hours till dinner, and then am I getting the protein in? And if I don't, if I only put, for me anyway, if I only put 30, I should be getting more than 100 grams a day. So if I only get 30 grams at each 3 meals, that's only 90. So I need to get something additionally in anyway, and most runners would probably be wise too. It's being strategic or consistent with protein, and then things like, obviously if we're experiencing bone density loss, things like calcium. To be honest, it was a little bit disheartening, the amount of sort of vitamins and minerals and micronutrients that we should be ensuring we're on top of. Magnesium, calcium, iron is a classic one, several vitamins. I mean, ultimately you'd hope that if someone was eating lots of fruit and vegetables, and ultimately a plant-based athlete is more likely to be, then hopefully they would cover off those areas. And she does say, eat, that you've heard, eat the rainbow idea, like if all your vegetables are green, like stuff, try and pop some yellow peppers on there, pop some pop some tomatoes, try and keep it colourful. That does imply different micronutrients. And I do say to my athletes sometimes, if they've sometimes get a little quick blood test to see if there's a deficiency. I know earlier we were saying those aren't sometimes the huge, the basics, but if you're doing lots of the basics well and yet you're still feeling a bit off, then sometimes it is worth looking into deficiencies. But I think for the masters athlete, number one, enough calories, number two, protein, and then it is the micronutrients of magnesium, calcium, trying to make sure there's all of those going in as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've found personally, I've been eating a vegan diet for 4 years now, and I think what I've found most impactful has been that because I've got this sort of restriction on my diet, I've had to be more interested in what I'm consuming. So I've had to care about this variety. I've had to care about getting like beans and legumes and finding different and new sources of protein. And I think by doing that, I've actually stumbled across this kind of cheat code of having a way more healthy diet just because I care more about getting everything I need, because I'm not just going, oh, you know what, like I used to as someone in my early 20s, I'd just have chicken and broccoli, because that was like the bodybuilder diet, you know, chicken, broccoli, and a bit of like spice or something. But now I actually try as much as I can to have variety and like keep it interesting. Like just from a personal level, just I'm interested. How long have you been a vegan? Like, what are the reasons why you turned to that diet? And do you think that it's had a positive impact on your endurance?
Yeah, I get asked that a bit. So yeah, it was about 5 years ago I sort of made the switch fully. And it was more of actually from an environmental perspective of looking at myself as an athlete and where are my big areas of like, I suppose, emissions, where are my big areas of my footprint, and where could I improve? And I felt a bit frustrated that I sort of wasn't quite willing to, you know, give up flying altogether. I've massively cut down, and I pledged to only fly once a year for running, but it seemed like such a big and maybe unfair thing to do, to say I'll never fly again for running. That seemed like a big one. And then the other areas are kit and your fueling, really. So kit, I kind of thought, well, you know, if I'm going to be the best athlete I'm probably still going to need a bit of sponsorship, but look, I'm so lucky I'm working with Normal now, and yeah, they don't put any. The biggest problem with kit is overconsumption, you know, creating new, trying to sell, and Normal, they put no direct pressure on me to sort of be promoting products. So that was a big thing for me. And then the third area was the fueling, and it was almost like, well, I can't be perfect in the other two. And, you know, veganism isn't perfect, but it could be reducing your footprint from food by up to 74%. So it's huge. I mean, without getting on a sort of ranty tangent, you know, the footprint from beef is just absolutely epic compared to almost everything else. So I'm just like, well, I'll try that for a bit and see. And I was actually like, I like this, and it seems it's easier than I thought, and I feel my conscience feels better for doing it. And then you've also got the animal welfare element, and then you've also got the health element. So I thought, like, if you've got 3 reasons to do something, that's quite a lot of reasons. There aren't many times elsewhere in the world that you get 3 strong reasons to, you know, actually I should do this. And so it seemed really obvious to me, and I've really enjoyed it. In terms of, I don't think I felt any different, is the truth. And I'll never know. I'll never know whether it's, you know, maybe it has helped me, maybe it hasn't. But either way, it would only be a small amount, I think. But I've really enjoyed it. And I did have regular blood tests at first to see if I was having any deficiencies, because I didn't want to suffer as an athlete. And I did think if I'm suffering as an athlete, I might go back, you know. But I couldn't see anything other than, one blood test picked out like a slight vitamin D deficiency, and I was already taking the supplement, but I wasn't taking enough, so I had to double it. You'll be all right there in Vietnam, perhaps, but yeah, Britain in the winter. I
was going to say, with your sort of winter, that's
well, Rini says that she thinks most people in Britain should be taking vitamin D supplement over the winter. So I haven't noticed. Yeah, no, I haven't noticed any change, but my conscience is much, much better. However, the question I get most, as you probably do actually, is like, how do you get your protein? But I very much agree with what you were saying, that when I was a meat eater, I didn't even think about protein. I didn't even think about it. But now I strategically think, get my protein. And I probably get loads more in now because I'm forced to think about it. I honestly, I find it fun, and it's quicker to pick off the menu, isn't it? Because there's usually I don't know what it's like in Vietnam, but
it's amazing here. I mean, I was just chatting with 2 guys I was with yesterday who amazingly were just like really open-minded, and I think I was just talking to them about, I was like, it's just refreshing to just speak to people who are open-minded and, you know, are just open to the idea of incorporating more plants and recognize that you can get protein through plants. And they were making sort of quib jokes about soy boy and all this sort of stuff, but that's sort of expected. But I was just saying to them, look, like I actually don't want to sit here and pretend that it's easy. My position is that although I'm in a relationship with someone who's really into their food and is also vegan, so that really helps because she's great. I am really interested in it as well, so that's helpful. But I wouldn't say that it's like super easy, because you're comparing it to like a former life of just going, yep, I'll have that, or I'll have this meat and I'll have this. So what I try and stress is that it's not necessarily about like just one diet is better than the other. It's about like, let's be reasonable and let's think about how we can incorporate different sources of protein rather than just it always being red meat, for example. Like there are great sources of protein. Some of those sources of protein have fiber in them as well, and many other ingredients. And these are really great, healthy sources of protein. You don't necessarily need to always be having meat in every meal. And I think that quite often, especially men, they get sold this myth that you need, if you're going to grow muscle, you need meat in every single meal, and because you need protein, and the only good source of protein is supposedly meat. And it's just a complete myth. I was like that. I was someone who, was a gym nut, and I attached my identity to meat consumption. And when I started to open my mind to the idea that actually maybe I should incorporate more plants, I just started to have a plate with more variety, a more colorful plate. I started to find more different, interesting ingredients. My food became more tasty because I was actually flavoring things properly. I became a better chef, and I started to feel better. And I'm like you, like they asked me yesterday, did you feel better when you like switched? I was like, to be honest, it's 4 years now. I don't really remember how I felt, but I certainly do remember not feeling worse. And I think many people have this experience of switching, but they don't try to switch in the right way, and they end up just they get hungry because they don't know what they're eating, and they'll just have veggies, or they'll go to a friend's place who'll cook them a vegan meal and just take the meat out of it, and it's just like, it's what you just serving me, rice and peppers, and that's not complete. So we're still advocating for a complete diet. We're just saying that you can find that protein source and everything else from different ingredients, basically, and from plants. That's probably the most vegan advocacy I've done on this podcast, Damian.
Well, probably no one likes things being sort of pushed down their throat, but I just know I feel better, sort of, ethically, or better conscience for it, and then I feel probably no different, or definitely no worse. And actually, chatting to Renee McGregor about it when I was sort of making the switch, a few months in, she thought maybe I'm simply, eating more carbohydrates in this diet than I would have before, and that might have been fueling my running well. And there's probably a good chance of that. But yeah, I mean, the whole time I've not been injured. I'm still, doing as well as I could possibly imagine at races and record attempts. So yeah, and lately I've been concentrating more on the strength work, and I'm not very muscular to look at, but I know I'm stronger than I used to be in terms of the sort of strength that a runner needs. So I don't feel like, and I do use some protein powders, definitely. That's really helpful. I guess that's the supplementation often between the meals, or for kind of like for a pudding and stuff like that. But yeah, no, perfectly healthy as far as I can tell.
Well, I actually don't use protein powder. I think I probably would if I had it, but I'm traveling a bit, so it's hard to find the right sorts of things when you're out and away. But yeah, man, it's been fascinating to talk to you. I think that everyone should go and read Run Forever. When's it out? Did you say 9th of April?
Yes, technically it's out 9th of April, but it's already available for pre-order. And I think, tomorrow I'm going up to the publishers in Sheffield to sign copies and send them out to people. So, and there will be an audio book, I meant to say, because runners, apparently their audiobooks that are based on running sell far better than their other audiobooks, because there are small publishers who do, like, I don't know, mountain biking and climbing guides and a lot of running books as well, but their running audiobooks sell far better than the other ones, for obvious reasons. But yeah, there'll be an audiobook version, all available 9th of April. Hopefully there's something for certainly runners in their 40s, but I'd say even in the 30s, there will be the early signs of age coming in there, whether you detect it or not. So it's I think there's stuff in there for every runner, really.
Oh well, I think there's certainly stuff that we can be reminded of, getting the basics right and preparing for as we age, you never know when that day comes when you start feeling the effects. And man, I appreciate you coming on. It's been a pleasure. It's been a bit of a dream come true to speak to the 2023 spine race winner.
Thank you.
But yeah, thanks, man. It's been cool.
Thanks so much. Happy running.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Damian. I certainly did. I think this stuff is really important. This focus on longevity, on staying healthy and productively training long into your life. I think it's something that is missed quite a lot in the running space. We focus a lot on performance, on achieving amazing goals, no matter what, at any cost. But I think the costs can be big. And I think a lot of runners fall into the trap of chasing the wrong things and ruining themselves in the process. But Damian has focused here on something that I think we should all pay more attention to. Damian's book is coming out very soon, Running Forever. You can pre-order it and you can go to the show notes and find the link for that. Go and show your support. Thank you, Damian, for coming on. If you're interested in supporting the podcast, go and check out the links in the show notes. There's some free stuff in there for you, and you can submit a question for the next Q&A. You can support the podcast by rating it and sharing it with your friends. Run the runnable. Keep showing up for yourself. And I'll see you next time.